I believe that currently we are in a phase where the mind is increasingly ready and ripe for understanding, whereas in the past, it, for some reason, whatever reason, wasn't. And what we found is that most traditions worked in a progressive way. So there would be a guru. The guru would give meditation practices or different practices. People would go about for 20, 30, 40, 50 odd years, reciting the practices, the prayers, the mantras, and then to eventually get to a place where the guru would tell them some type of very direct knowledge and understanding. And if they didn't understand it, he'd say, right, don't worry, go back to the drawing board, go to that meditation practice, go for another 10 years. And they would recycle this over and over and over again. For whatever reason, they were not having any glimpses, as far as we are aware. The common person in these villages or places, they weren't having clear awakenings for whatever reason back then. At least it's not been spoken about. Nowadays, we're walking down the park and, we're having these awakenings. We're finding copious amounts of mushrooms. We're finding LSD, different psychedelics that are coming, seemingly just bubbling over the past 100 years, bringing self-recognition without the need of a teacher or a guru. Now, the biggest issue is when nowadays, most people that I've met, and I've only been doing this for 2 years now, sharing this understanding, but pretty much everyone that I've met, and I would rest assured that so many others have found the same. Most people have had, at least the people I've spoken to, an experience of their true nature without the need for a guru or someone to get help and give them a practice. In fact, it is in most cases the awakening experience that they had that they then started the spiritual journey and started to do practices. Now, I'm not comparing the people who've had an awakening to the people who haven't, because they're both actually in the same place. This is the craziest thing. The one who's never had a seemingly awakening experience and the one who seems to have had a glimpse or an awakening experience, they're in the same realm. There's no difference between them. In fact, I would say the one that's had the awakening experience just has a little bit more distractions. And what's happening is that in our day and age, we are kind of, not in our day and age, but this is generally speaking throughout the whole entire, as far as we're aware of spiritual seeking, the seeking that most people think they're doing, when people think they're on a spiritual path, what they're actually on is a process of exhausting seeking energy. They're not on a spiritual path. Most people think they're on a spiritual path. They're not. They're just exhausting seeking energy via spiritual things. So when the sage that I told you, the guru from the village, thousands of years ago, was giving the village the meditation practices originally, he was giving them those tools to exhaust the seeking energy. They didn't start the spiritual path. That was not the spiritual path. Technically, you could say it is the spiritual path, but as far as we know it, to consider the spiritual path would be the path that we take out of the genuine interest in the path that we take, that is not for the sake of removing our suffering. This is the key difference. People who are exhausting their seeking energy are people who are on a spiritual path, which isn't actually a path at all. It is a hamster wheel of recycling through the seeking energy. And the seeking energy is literally just the desire to remove suffering. Now, here's this. Think about this. The desire to remove suffering is what suffering is. It's actually suffering in its purest form. So what we find is that commonly we go through sufferings of life that just generally thinks, oh, my dog died, my cat died, my mum died, my this died, or this breakup, that breakup. Whatever it might be nowadays, I'm bullied at school, this thing, that thing. We suffer these like events, right? Most people suffer life events. And eventually they suffer enough life events that they then realize, oh, hold on a minute, I'm actually suffering, right? Most people, they don't know they're suffering, and then they figure out that they're suffering, and all of a sudden they start to want to remove the last obstacle which they think is an obstacle, which is their suffering. So they say, I'm not going to try and remove all of these things because I know these things won't bring me happiness. I will try to remove the last thing that made me suffer, which was my own suffering. So we're not seeking now to remove our suffering via the world. We're now seeking to remove our suffering by just trying to remove our suffering. This then takes us to spiritual practices, books, teachers, and this is where 99% of the spiritual landscape is. Mostly everyone, apart from few people, are just on a process of exhausting their seeking energy. They're not actually on the spiritual path that they think they're on. So, the spiritual path, if there is to be a path at all, does not start with wanting to remove our suffering. It starts when we are genuinely interested in the truth. What is the truth? Well, by that time, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to, but to put it plainly, the truth about life, the truth about ourselves, the truth about experience. It doesn't matter what truth, it's just a genuine desire and interest in whatever truth might be. And that just genuine desire and interest in truth is finally where we are actually open and receptive to understanding. So when the guru sends the guys away for 40 years to do the meditation practice, what they're actually doing is, you could say, emptying their mind enough to go into as many experiences as possible where they do not know what they are. That's what meditation is. Sit there for long enough that you forget you're a separate self. If you do that for long enough, eventually you'll stop forgetting you're a separate self more often when you're in experience. This is where the meditation practice seems to bridge into or bleed into our lives. What's really happening is that meditation is simply to not be in the belief of being a temporary, limited, finite self. So when you're not in the belief of being a temporary, limited, and finite self, that's what we call meditation. That's what we call the flow state. That's what we call peace, happiness, love. And depending on the circumstance that seemed to have brought that to us will depend on the name we give it. But ultimately, it's true being. That's our true nature. And that's the nature of our experience, the background of our experience, which is always present. It's just seemingly covered by layers of resistance. So what we find then is that above all things, the spiritual path starts with a desire for truth without the desire for truth for the purposes of removing our suffering. Now, if you understand what I'm saying now in this video, this is going to be a very, very insightful video for you, because this is going to completely change the way you see everything on this spiritual path. So the idea of enlightenment is literally ego bait to make one attracted enough to do something other than what they do day to day. So think about it. If there wasn't a reason to change the way that you live, you would just live the way you live. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if we live the way we live, the consequence is suffering. That's just what happens in life. The consequence is the Buddha's fundamental rule. Life is suffering. Why is it suffering? Because if we just let to our own devices, so to speak, to just go out into the world and just do and be whatever, it just results in suffering. That suffering wakes us up to wanting to remove suffering. Now, if there wasn't a big enough reason to take a spiritual path, we would just do the things in the world. We just do that forever. The things of buy the car, the this, the that, the relationship, the blah, 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 the drugs, the alcohol, blah, blah, blah. Or I'll just end up killing myself. That's what some people do. That's what I almost did, right? So unless there is something loud enough, profound enough, sacred enough that can, shine its radar throughout the world, we probably wouldn't listen to it. I mean, think about the ideas of enlightenment now, these Bollywood ideas of enlightenment, that it's going to change your state of mind and this exotic grand experience, and most people still don't listen to it. So the idea of enlightenment being a different alternate state of mind, which is going to give you a feeling, some kind of altered state, which you will enjoy rather than the one you used to have, is ego bait. Because on the ultimate level, the true experience of enlightenment, if we're going to even use that bastardized term, is to be completely content, irrespective of what you feel or what you think. So most people go on the spiritual path to change how they feel and what they think, only to finally come to the realization that the actual truth And the actual experience of unconditional happiness, the actual experience of enlightenment, is to be completely at peace with whatever feeling, thought, or state one is currently in, which actually is unattractive to the separate self. If you told that to people, they think, why would I want that? I already know I don't want what I'm currently experiencing. It's a load of shit, right? So why would I want that? Therefore, the separate self would never consider taking a spiritual path, because who would want what more of what it already knows it doesn't want? So do you see the psychology behind the idea of enlightenment is actually wisdom? It's not something to throw away, it's wisdom. However, it is outdated wisdom. We no longer need the same wisdom that we used to need. In other words, I can come on YouTube and make a video like this instead of telling people there's an enlightened state and you all must attain it. If you don't attain it, you will go into samsara and you'll die and recycle and all these negative consequences, which you really don't want to go through, right? Because you want the good consequences. We don't need to use death threats, rebirth threats. We don't need to do this anymore, you see? So the key thing to understand here is we are at a moment in time where the wisdom of truth is actually developing. It's not staying the same. The essence is the same. The message is the same. But the way it is spoken about, the way it is transmitted is different. It's evolving. Why? Because God forbid the collective mind or consciousness is actually evolving. Obviously, it is, right? On the level of experience, that's what's happening. On an ultimate level, consciousness doesn't evolve, right? There's no evolution of consciousness. There's no states of consciousness. There's only states of mind. And the consciousness that experiences that is in the already present, pristine, formless absence of state, which is what we truly are. On the relative level, this is where we actually experience, and on that level, concessions are required. So, what is a concession? A concession is a true act of compassion. Compassion is the highest form of intelligence. Compassion is the intelligence of love. So, in order to apply a concession, you must understand the perspective of the one you are applying a concession to, which is why you have some teachers don't give concessions. I don't know why. Possibly it's because they do not understand fully the circumstances of the individual that is being spoken to. So a concession is to give a lesser truth for the purpose of a greater understanding. So if I say, so for instance, the concession of the guru, the ancient guru who says to take this meditation practice for 20 years, the concession is that they need a meditation practice. That's not true. However, it is true depending on where they're at and what they currently believe. You can't just remove a belief from someone's brain. You can't just change the way they see. The changing the way one sees is totally up to them. So a concession must be implied or given with worthy inquiry, or in an open channel like this where we can choose to listen or not listen. Those concessions get thinner and thinner and thinner and gradually fade away. So the reason that we have the non-dual traditions as they are is because they are applying concessions or a lack of concessions, which is either causing more or less confusion. Now, the goal of someone who even bothers to open their mouth about these types of topics, obviously, on that level, should be to create more clarity over more confusion. If you create more clarity, then you must also be willing to apply more concessions. And with more concessions, you must be able to reciprocate more understanding on the level of the individual, the apparent individual that is seeking to understand what you're trying to say. If you do not meet them on the level of that concession, they might be confused, they might go somewhere else, and they will just go to someone else who can apply the concession that we're not willing to make. This is why Ramana Maharshi would mostly stay silent. And then if he had to, he may open his mouth and tell someone to ask themselves, who am I? You see? That's a concession. Okay, I have to pretend this person's an individual fundamentally, and I have to listen to what they have to say. And okay, they ask this question, so to that question, I will ask them a question which will point them to their experience of understanding it without needing me. That's a very compassionate concession. Ramana Maharshi had to pretend for a moment that there was a separate individual and communicate this to the separate individual. But here's the thing. Just because the separate individual isn't fundamentally real, it doesn't mean as God we are capable of creating that reality. So when we say a concession is to provide a lesser truth, ultimately there is no lesser or more truth. From the ultimate point of view, we should be able to respect all levels of reality as truth. And this is what isn't communicated in the classic non dual traditions, which is why we're finding so much confusion. So, on an ultimate level, if we are willing to take a step in this direction and understand what I'm sharing in this video, the only way we'll ever get to that step of understanding it is if we come to a fundamental conclusion that I have absolutely no idea. I don't know what I am. I don't know. I had an awakening experience and I thought I was this, but I could have been wrong, because currently right now I obviously believe myself to be separate, but I also know that I'm not really separate. So if I seem to know but don't know and I'm in this gray area, the best conclusion we can come to, and the wisest conclusion that we can come to, is that we don't know what we are. And from that point, this is what I call the adventurer state. It is the state that we are in like children. It is the place of pure curiosity, pure interest, pure desire, pure adventure. We are just genuinely interested in truth and understanding what we are without the desire to remove our suffering. So two things. First, we need to see suffering doesn't need to be removed. I've got other videos on this. I can link that for you. And then we need to embody what we are on a preliminary level, which is we don't need to know what we are. We just need to know that we don't know what we are and be very clear on that. Most people say, I don't know what I am, but they secretly believe themselves to be a temporary self. So it's getting to a conclusion that we have absolutely no idea. If we have absolutely no idea, amazing. We're in the adventurous state. We can actually embark on these contemplations. We can embark on these, you could say, adventures, explorations, projects with genuine passion and curiosity, in the same way we would explore science or art or beauty or photography, whatever we love to do for art and for fun. Fun is an expression of freedom. Fun is not an egoic endeavor. It's an expression of freedom. The separate self doesn't want to have fun. So, in essence, the new paradigm, the new part of the path that we ideally, as a concession, should be aiming for, if we are not currently experiencing, so to speak, what we fundamentally are, and we seem to continue to suffer, yet we have already seen our true nature and have had all these spiritual experiences and blah, blah, blah. The best conclusion to come to is that we fundamentally do not know what we are, and start there. Now we're going to be very interested and passionate about truth. Stop caring about removing our suffering. Suffering cannot be removed. It does not need to be removed. All that we should be interested in is just truth itself. So, in conclusion, there's nothing wrong with the way traditions have been. Everything has been an act of wisdom that has been created in the moment, at the need of the time of the generation that these things were being shared. Now, in the same way, this generation, this day and age, this time must now be expressed from this time, from this generation, with this generation. So we use the wisdom of the past as inspiration and a measurement, and we use the wisdom of the now to take that beyond where it has been before. I have a community where this is entirely embodied, and I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. We can thinner and thinner and gradually dissolve these concessions together. If you'd like to join, the link's in the description. I'd love to see you there. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care.